Hello students and welcome to another video. I'm your teacher Mr. Flynn, and today we're going to be taking notes on the inheritance of traits. Now there's a word you need to understand, and that is alleles. Okay, they are different versions of a gene. Okay, a gene is the observable characteristic of a trait. So if you remember from our previous video, right, if we have DNA here, we have these strands and they've got these little ladders in them like this. All right, and we take a section of DNA. This actually codes for a trait, right? And we call this a gene. And this gene shows us, I'm trying to draw an arrow here, gives us a trait. All right, and then the trait that we're going to be observing in this example is the color of pea plants. And in this basically in pea plants, there's only two possible variations. We can have yellow or green. All right, and so this gene, okay, in either a yellow or green plant is going to either express yellow or green, and the genes on our DNA are going to express this. And the different varieties of that is called an allele. So they're different versions of the same thing, okay? You can do the same thing with eye color, right? Like I have blue eyes, all right? Some of you may have brown eyes, some of you have hazel or green, okay? And these characteristics are expressed from our DNA, okay? All right, now, as we go down, this is just going to build on itself. We're just going to be building a story as we go, okay? Now, these traits are determined by alleles, okay? So the traits of yellow and green are determined by the different types of gene variation. For each trait, it says if the letter is capitalized, it is dominant, meaning it's going to express the trait if it is present. If the letter is lowercase, it is recessive, meaning it will only express its trait if the dominant allele is absent. So, in this example, yellow is dominant because in here I have a capital Y versus a lowercase y. All right, so the lowercase y tells me that this is recessive, and then this y is dominant. All right, and we'll go through and talk about what dominant means, all right, and what recessive means as we go. But just understand, okay, that we're taking this color and we're actually relating it to a letter. So instead of looking at it as yellow, we just look at the letter and we say, okay, capital Y means it's a dominant form of a trait, and I am making yellow that dominant form. The recessive form, which is not dominant, is lowercase y, and you'll start to understand what this means as we go, okay? Now just remember, if the capital Y is present, it is always going to be yellow. Okay, if the capital Y is there, it's always yellow. Now, if we have a combination, let's just go down here and talk about this. All right, in nature, alleles are paired to express their traits. Okay, so if alleles are the same, it is known as homozygous for that trait. All right, because you get traits from mom and you get traits from dad. That's basically how this is working, okay? And the dominant form that you get from either of your parents is the thing that you express, okay? And in this pea plant, we have big Y, okay? These are both dominant, so it's going to be expressed as yellow because the dominant gene expression is there. The dominant allele is there. Now, these little y's, okay, they are recessive. Okay, and it's going to be green because there's no big yellow one there. Okay, and we call this homozygous. Okay, and the reason we call it homozygous is it's the same. Big Y, little y, little y. Now, what happens if we do a hybrid where we have a big Y and a little y put together? All right, this is known as heterozygous for the trait. And we also call these hybrids. It's the same kind of idea. They're a hybrid because they are a mix between the two different traits. Okay, and you'll notice that the color of the seed is matching yellow instead of green. And the reason for this, okay, is because the big Y is present. Because the big Y is present, this is dominant and this one is recessive. The green gene that's hiding in there is it's kind of just hiding in there. It's just kind of in the DNA, but it's not expressed. Okay, so as we're going through here, all right, as we're walking through, all right, you need to know the difference between dominant and recessive. Dominant is always capitalized, recessive is always lowercase. Okay, now if the pair of dominant or recessive genes is the same, we call it homozygous. Big Y, little y, little y. And if we have a mixture of big Y, little y, we are going to have what we call a hybrid, or it's heterozygous. And the dominant trait will be expressed. It will not be the recessive. So basically, to have green seeds, you need to have little y, little y. You can't have big Y at all. Okay? All right, so as we work our way down, okay, the genotype is the allele pair, and the phenotype is the trait expressed. All right, so for example, big Y, this is our genotype, okay? And then our phenotype is the color of the seed. So we have yellow as our color, okay? And then you may notice here I've outlined this word again, homozygous, and we have big Y, and little y, little y. So to get a green seed, you need two little y's in order to get that phenotype of green. And then we have our hybrid, which is in between, which we have big Y, little y there. You can see that. So you can see here which one's more common, which is going to be easier to form. Well, we have yellow seeds, and we have one green seed. Okay, so you're seeing here that dominant traits are going to express themselves much more commonly than our recessive traits. You know, one of those examples is red hair. Like, there's not very many redheads out in society because it's a recessive trait. There's dominant traits that are dominating that color, and you have to get both of those genes from your parents, okay, to have that recessive trait. And that's kind of why red hair is more rare, just like green seeds, okay? All right, we're going to keep going down. All right, now this part can be a little complicated, but if you stay with me, we'll get there, okay? All right, so we have what we call two different generations. We have F1 generation and F2. And how this works is if we take two homozygous yellow and green seeds and we cross them, they form a hybrid, okay? And you'll see here that we have big Y, and little y. And they're brought together and they make a hybrid, okay? And they develop a seed that is yellow, right? But you can see here that the green recessive trait is still there, okay? And so when we do the next generation, let's say we take these hybrids and mix them, and what we find is that they occur on the color occurs on a 3-to-1 ratio. And when Mendel was working with pea plants, he was confused why he was mixing yellow seeds, and all of a sudden, every now and then, a green seed would pop up. And he was like, there must be some hidden characteristic that we can't see. And what he would realize is that when we're working with this second generation of hybrids, he recognized that the dominant trait was overpowering the recessive trait. And then when you happen to get two of these Ys to be mixed together, okay, we ended up getting something of a green seed. And it was just coming up randomly, and it always came in a 3-to-1 ratio. And so he was able to make predictions because of this. And he was putting pea plants together, and he was starting to see these differences. Okay? Now, down below, let's just kind of outlaw what this kind of looks like when we develop these hybrids. Okay? Now, if we look here, there's two laws that Mendel created: the law of segregation and of alleles, okay, and then the law of independent assortment. So how that works is anytime these traits are being passed down to the next generation, they completely separate from each other. So we have big Y, they separate from each other, and little y, separate from each other. Okay? And now that these alleles are separate, we have something called independent assortment, and it's random. So big Y could be paired with another big Y to make this one. Big Y could be paired with a little y to make something like this. Or little y and little y could make something like that. All right, like our green seed here. And these are going to be random. They're going to start mixing with each other. And they're going to start to, I don't know why I did that. They can actually start to mix and share those genes as they proceed on to the next generation. Okay, so the law of segregation basically says that these are going to split from each other, and then they're going to randomly assort themselves, and we call that the law of independent assortment. And that's what generates these 3-to-1 ratios when you're mixing hybrids. Okay, all right. Now, there's a lot in this video, and we broke a lot of things down, and you're going to do a lot of practice with this, and as you go, you will start to pick it up as you practice it. Okay, but if you need to, come back and you work from the top. We have alleles, which are different versions of a trait. We have dominant versus recessive, and they come in pairs in nature because you get one from dad and one from mom. Okay, and if they're the same, we call it homozygous, and if they're different, we call it heterozygous or a hybrid. And then this is kind of just an overview, and then when they mix with each other, all right, we experience separation, the law of segregation, okay? And this is also known as meiosis, and we're not going to cover meiosis this year. We're only going to cover mitosis. It's what cell division. All right, meiosis is when you create gametes, like sex cells, like sperm and eggs, and that's what causes this law of segregation to occur. All right, and there's other things that go on, like crossing over, but we're not going to get into that detail in this class. And then once they're separated from each other, their traits are separated, they randomly assort themselves to create all kinds of different variation. And we call that the law of independent assortment. Okay? All right, now you're going to model this with an activity. If you have any questions, please come talk with me.